We often do after the election to talk about what happened, what were the trends, some about why we think what happened, and then also to talk about what are the implications for governing as a result, and what can we expect from the next legislative session, which will be a conversation we will certainly be continuing tomorrow as well. So first up, we are going to be, as we have in the past, asking you some questions via what's called Vbox on your phone. So I would encourage you to join the Wi-Fi if you haven't. It's guest and password the wood, which seems like a weird password to me, but that's what they picked. So whatever sort of device you have, pop it out. We're going to be asking you some questions here. So many of you have done this before. It generally works okay. All right, so guest and the wood, and I believe capitalization is sort of important like this, right? Yeah. Yes, Anya's giving you the thumbs up. All right. So first, before we start, a little cartoon. What outcome in midterm elections are you most excited about? And I think universally we will all agree that it is the end of the gosh darn campaign commercials and mail, and there's even applause over here for the end of commercials. It seemed almost worse this year than I think I have ever seen it. So on your device, go to your browser and enter vbox.app. We're going to ask some questions here about what you think about this, that, or whatever. I'm going to try to do it at the same time. There's also instructions in your folder on how to do this too. All right, so you should get a screen then that says enter session ID, and so the session ID there is 191221767. It's a little hard to read on my screen. Is it legible on there? Good. Okay. All right, how are we doing? Marshall has to help Mayor Schultz with his device there. So you should, if you enter that in, you should get a screen that says CGMC Fall Conference 2022. See that we're going to have to assign Mayor Schultz sort of a permanent young person to assist him with his technology. So we're getting there.
He's a real He's some kind of computer.
All right. So, like I said, you should see a screen like this. And so, what will happen then is we'll pull up a polling question. It'll also arrive on your phone there, and it'll be open. You can change your answer as many times as you want before I close the poll. So you can go back and forth, change your mind, have different opinions. That's not a problem at all. So we use this both as an item of fun and to actually get feedback about what's on your minds here. So with that, let's remember what the questions are. Let's find out. Okay, so were you surprised by the election results? So I've clicked through here. Should have it in front of you.
Yes, it's going.
Looks like we've got 71 people logged in, 72 people logged in, 73, 70 responses. All right. Well, let's close her out here and see what folks thought. 66% yes, 33% no. Well, I put myself in the yes category. I was fairly surprised by the results. And we'll talk a little bit about why. I'm very glad that none of you fell in the third category there, because then clearly be in the wrong place. So let's see what else we got here. What surprised you most about the election? Was it the DFL keeping control of the Minnesota House, the DFL winning control of the Minnesota Senate, or the GOP failing to win an election statewide?
I'd say the same.
And I think you can only pick one. If you were surprised by all three of those, just pick your favorite. All right, we've got deliberating going on. Let's see what the folks said here. All right, so only about 7% of you were surprised by the DFL keeping control of the House. About half of you, a little more, surprised by the DFL winning the Senate. And a fair amount, almost 40%, surprised that the GOP failed to win at least one statewide office, keeping their 18-year streak alive, 2006 to 2022, something like that. Long time since they won a statewide election. Okay. What were the top two factors in your mind that you think played into the election here in Minnesota? Was it folks who were concerned about the health of our democracy, highest inflation in decades, the Supreme Court abortion decision, public safety and guns, or were you just thinking that candidate quality really made a difference here? And I think you can pick. Somehow I got bounced out of the box.
Number 3, number 4.
All right.
I would have taken number 5.
Folks are deliberating very seriously. 52, 53, 55.
Are we?
Pretty entertaining to just hear me stand up here and say numbers, I'm sure. All right, folks have their answers in? We're going to go forward. All right, so 75% clear thought on the abortion question. Surprising, 52% pointed at candidate quality. Interesting, very interesting. All right, yeah, we'll talk more about all of these things here in just a second.
What happened for you following?
How would you characterize the outcome for Greater Minnesota? Was it good, was it bad, or are you just unsure?
I think it's good.
It's maybe, I think there's going to be something.
Better than it was. I'm sure. It was better than it was.
I think so.
He always wins.
All right, almost half of you thought it was bad, about a quarter are unsure, and a little more than that think that the outcome is good. Interesting. Well, I think we're going to have a lot of discussion about that here in a minute. So let's hear. All right. Do you have a new House or Senate member? New House member, new Senate member, both are new. My House and Senate members are the same.
New house member. Number 1.
In that district, I know.
All right, we're closing it here. Let's see what folks got. Oh, 50% the same. Sounds about right. Both members are new. That's quite a high number, 20%. Okay. Yeah, no, there was a lot of turnover in the legislature. About 35% of the state house is brand new. 25% of the Senate is new. There are going to be a lot of new faces to meet here in the next couple of months. So, what is your opinion of your new or returning state house member? They do great work, or they're going to do great work. I'm willing to give them a chance, or they were my second choice for a reason.
We're going to give them a chance.
Yeah.
see how optimistic folks are about their own particular election scenario here. All right, let's see what we got.
More than election.
All right, you're a fairly open-minded group. You're going to give them a chance. About equal numbers think that they're great, and equal numbers maybe had a different opinion. Yeah, we're going to give them a chance, which I think is pretty much at this point, before we get into too deep into the session, all we can do. So same question essentially for your state senator. They do great work. We're going to give them a chance again. They were second choice for a reason. I'm guessing the outcome is going to be very, very
So
simple.
giving them a chance.
There we go.
Trying to click on them.
All right.
They do something.
Oh, almost spot on. All right, so let's talk about the results here. Thank you for playing our game. Flaherty and Hood now has all of your credit card numbers. Yeah. Everybody wins. So we're going to talk a little bit about the national election results, and then the statewide, and some of these themes I think intermingle and are complementary of each other. So the conventional wisdom going into this and the pre-election narrative that was out there in the ether was that Biden is a super unpopular president. The president's party does poorly in the midterms. The economy and crime are winning issues for the GOP, and that the energy around abortion and that discussion maybe had been waning since the summer and the Dobbs decision earlier this year from its summer highs. I think that was sort of some questions about will that issue have the currency in November that it did in June and July. So in the House, or in the Senate rather, we're still waiting on Georgia, but essentially the Democrats will hold the Senate again because of Vice President Kamala Harris's vote. So it only remains to be seen if they'll be joined by Senator Warnock or Herschel Walker. So that's going to be fascinating. We're going to find out. In the House, Republicans take control. We're still counting. There are a number of races still outstanding, but they have, I think as of just today, announced crossed that threshold in which they will have control of the House. But again, it's going to be a very, very tight, very slim margin that they will have. But nonetheless, you're going to have Speaker McCarthy instead of Speaker Pelosi. So national exit polling, this is sort of what was on people's minds. Just kind of a grab of a couple of stats that stood out to us. 68% of respondents said that they thought democracy in the U.S. was threatened. Nearly a third of respondents said inflation was the issue that mattered most in deciding how they voted. And of those, 7 in 10 voted for Republicans. More than 25% voted or listed abortion as a top issue. And about 61% said they were unhappy with the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and 7 in 10 of those folks voted for the Democratic House candidate. So you see the issues that end up having currency and being discussed. By far, it was the inflation piece, the abortion piece, and somewhat the health of our democracy were driving impulses in people's minds as they went to the polls. So in Minnesota, let's look at how we had, again, conventional wisdom failed in Minnesota as well. So there were lots of predictions that the GOP would hold the Senate and likely flip the Minnesota House. There were also predictions that the GOP may win one of the statewide races for the first time since 2006. I talked about that streak. So I don't know if any of you read the Minnesota Reformer or get their morning newsletter. They're sort of an independent, leftish leaning news outlet. But their editor, Patrick Cooligan, basically talked to 8 sort of political insiders. 7 of the 8 predicted that the GOP would win both houses of the legislature. So all of these supposedly smart people and experts and insiders 7 of 8 of them were dead wrong. And so I think a lot of folks were taken off guard by the election results. I know there was a lot of head scratching in our office on Wednesday morning. So turnout, we'd like to look at this. Minnesota turnout was down by about 3.5% from the previous midterm election. So these are comparing midterms to midterms, so that we've got sort of an apples to oranges comparison. But we are above what seemed to be the trend in 2006, 2010, and 2014. My sense of this, you're going to see this pattern essentially in all of the turnout graphs that we will show. My sense of this is that in 2016, there was a lot of energy infused into our elections by Donald Trump, love him or hate him. It motivated people to vote, and so I think that's why you see that kind of pattern. Greater Minnesota turnout, just a little bit less in terms of raw numbers from where we were in 2018, but again, you see that same trend where there's a jump between 14 and 18, and then a little leveling off this year. So the share of the statewide vote, this is something, again, that we've also been kind of tracking and looking at is, you know, what is Greater Minnesota's share of the statewide vote? And so in 2018, we were at 42.7, and in 2022, we're at 44.1. I don't recall, and I wish I did, and I wish I had looked at it earlier, where Greater Minnesota was at during the presidential election. My sense is it might be a little bit higher, but I think these have been roughly the proportions that we've been looking at for a while here. Metro turnout remains strong. Again, you've got that same pattern, where again, you know, they, you know, well ahead of the 2014 measure, a little bit behind the 2018 measure, but still pretty close when you're looking at, you know, almost 1.5 million votes cast in this 7-county metro. So the race for governor, you've got dueling middle-aged guys pointing, with Tim Walz, Scott Jensen. You know, so here's what we said. If you were with us in the summer conference, we took a poll, who's going to win? About 80% of you said that it was going to be Governor Walz, and about 20% said it was going to be Dr. Jensen. So congratulations to the 80%. You were correct in your prognostication. I do not have any kind of medal or anything to give you. You'll just have to have the quiet satisfaction of being correct. The Walz vote total, and this, unfortunately, this graphic I think is maybe a little bit misleading in terms of showing the proportions. About 1.3 million to 1.1 million was the total in terms of the election. And so the, you know, the percent margin of victory was, you know, between 7 and 8%, which is less than what Governor Walz beat Jeff Johnson by in 2018. So where did these votes come from? Again, you know, these are the trends that we have been seeing, and so, you know, I'm almost sort of getting bored looking at these charts from 2018, 2020, 2022, because they all show the same thing, but I think what it does show, or the thing that I take away from it, is that these trends are generally not going away. This is the pattern that we are most definitely on. So if you look at the 7-county metro, again, there's a significant disparity between Walz and Jensen. If you add in Olmsted and St. Louis County, the other two biggest counties, you get, you know, that disparity continues. You flip it, you look at the other 78 counties, it is what you would expect in terms of Jensen edging Walz, but not by a huge margin. You know, one of the online newspaper folks, maybe it was even the Star Tribune, had an article that was like, you know, how can Republicans not be winning when, you know, there's, you know, 80, you know, counties that are voting, you know, if Jensen's direction, or whatever the number was. It was a little bit less than that. And obviously, as we know, the center of population is in the metro. There's a lot of empty space in many of the counties in rural Minnesota versus Ramsey or Hennepin or Washington. And so that is where the people are. That's how that ends up playing out. So the maps, as you look at them, can be obviously somewhat deceiving. Margin of victory, just the last several gubernatorial elections. Of course, in 2010, we had the recount involving Tom Emmer and Mark Dayton. Dayton then a comfortable margin in 14. You know, down from, and again, this is the raw number, and so if you think that, you know, we were down 3.5%, you know, just the raw number is probably going to be a little bit less. But this is, you know, I think not insignificant, about 100,000 difference between the margin in 2018 and 2022. So victory by county. In 2018, Walls won 22 counties, and in 2020 he won 13 counties rather. And so you can see sort of where some of that drop-off was in northern Minnesota, in northwest Minnesota, a couple of counties in southern Minnesota that he had previously won in 2018, but did not in 2022. So my working theory on how Governor Walz was going to do in greater Minnesota was there were a lot of people that I knew through my work here, traveling around the state, talking to folks who see themselves as independents, see themselves as moderates, may have some history with Tim Walz from when he was in Congress down in southern Minnesota. And so my working theory was a lot of folks, you know, who may even be moderate Republicans, voted for Walz in 2018. They were willing to give him a chance, but the circumstances of the last 4 years were such that that was not going to happen again. That if you had sort of identified yourself as a moderate or a independent or maybe even a moderate Republican, a lot of those folks I did not think, and I think it turned out we're probably not going to give Walz their consideration this year. I'm guessing there's a number of people in this room who may fit that category, but we're not going to ask. So, the summer conference we also hold on the legislative races. So, what was going to happen? Is it going to be the status quo, a GOP Senate, a Republican House, or a DFL House? Conventional wisdom, GOP takes both. Something kind of weird happens maybe, and they each flip. Or the long shot, that the DFL controls both bodies. We were all wrong. As you can see there, only 3.3% of us, which I'm guessing was probably 1%, picked that the DFL would be in control of both. So I think that there was a lot of, at that time, a snapshot in time, end of July, thinking that things would go towards the Republican side of the ledger. We're all wrong. DFL has full control. So now as we look at this and start to get into what does it mean for governing, the DFL House majority, assuming everything kind of plays out according to the current numbers, there are 2 races that are being recounted. But if the leads hold, you're going to end up with, again, 70 DFL members of the House, 64 Republican members. There's 134 total. The 2 recounts are DFL incumbents. So the only thing that the DFL can do is grow their majority in that scenario. I think in one of the races they're ahead by 30 some odd votes, and the other one is like 25. It's very very close, but usually these recounts do tend to stay with the lead. House maps that show up very good. Oh yeah, you can see just from 2018 to 2022 the difference by precinct here in terms of how folks voted in their House elections. You know, one of the things that really stood out to me on this map is if you look at the left corner there, about 3/4 of the way up, that's Clay County area. Representative Marquardt and Senator Eakin, neither of whom ran again. And so compare it to the 22 map, boy, a lot of that blue just went away. Certainly, I think Representative Eakin outraced every Democrat on every ballot that he was on probably for the last 15 years. He just worked that hard. People knew him. People liked him. And so there's certainly a big difference without him being on the ballot in terms of people's voting patterns. And so that House seat that was Representative Marquardt's now went Republican. House Metro looks very similar to what we had in 2018. You can still essentially walk from Lake Minnetonka to the St. Croix River if you want, basically taking 94 across. So, you know, very similar, but it was very much here in the suburbs that a lot of these races were control of the majorities really came down to. So we also looked at, okay, so who's in the majority? We know it's the Democrats. Of those people, how many of them are from greater Minnesota? I.e., how many people are there that we can really lean on to be our champions at the legislature? So this includes all of what you would call probably the rural stuff, and then also Rochester and Duluth. And so In terms of a percentage of the caucus in 2020, they were about 21% Greater Minnesota. They're now down to 16%. And so that again is a trend that has been growing over time, where the Greater Minnesota portion of the DFL caucus has been shrinking pretty dramatically. If you go back and look at this stat or one of those maps from 2006, 2008, you would think you're living in a different state. There's lots of splotches of blue here, there, and everywhere, and there's a lot of more, although not a majority, but a lot more rural representation within the DFL House caucus. Total votes, rural versus metro. Again, the same pattern that we saw with the gubernatorial race. Nothing really terribly surprising here at all. You see the trend from 2018 to 2020 in terms of the Democrats, sort of losing ground even in rural Minnesota, which we're, for these purposes defining, and I'm looking at Anya to make sure I'm saying this correctly, outside of the 7 county metros. So the other 80 counties is kind of what we're throwing into that. So, with the Democrats in charge, who's going to be the leader? We're going to keep with Melissa Horton as the speaker. She's been the speaker for the last couple of terms. With Ryan Winkler resigning to run for Hennepin County Attorney, we have a new House Majority Leader, which is Jamie Long, a guy from Minneapolis. He is in his third term. He's a smart guy. He's a go-getter. He had previously worked for Keith Ellison. And even though he is a Minneapolis legislator, I do think that he is somebody we can definitely do business with. He's a pretty thoughtful guy, and I think that is a pretty good pick for the House Majority. On the Republican side, the new House Minority Leader is Lisa Damon from the St. Cloud area. Kurt Dowd did throw his hat in the ring and did not prevail. So some shakeup in terms of the House Republican leadership. Again, I think she's a very sensible person. She's pretty thoughtful. Again, I think somebody that we can definitely do business with. So the Senate, as we know, the DFL took control by 1 vote, and so you saw in 2020 how close it was. If you throw in the 2 independent senators, Senator Bach and Senator Tomassoni, the Green there, giving the Republicans, because they caucused with the Republicans, a little bit of a cushion in terms of their majority. We are now about as close as we can get at 34-33 Democrats, and that has implications for governing as well. So really the seats that put the Democrats over the line in terms of majority, Grant Hauschild up in northern Minnesota, what was Senator Bach's district, DFLer from Hermantown, who's on the city council there, so he knows local government, won. Rob Kupek up in Moorhead, was able to hold on to the Kent Egan seat for the Democrats. Eric Putnam from St. Cloud, who is now in his second term, was able to get reelected in a pretty tough race, or at least on paper a tough race, with Representative Tama Tice. She decided to run for the Senate and did not prevail. But we're going to miss her in the House. She was a very good legislator as well. Liz Bolden, who was a House member who ran for what had been Senator Senjum's seat, so that is essentially a flip. Heather Gustafson beat Roger Chamberlain, the former tax chair. Many of you were here a couple of years ago after we got our LGA increase in 2019. His party comment in conference committee was, "Wow, I hope all those cities and counties are fat and happy now because they got a whole bunch of money." Well, I hope he's fat and happy sitting on the sidelines. And then in my area, Demo, at an open seat, a very closely contested race, Judy Seeberger, the Democrat, beat Tom Dimple, the Republican. Very, very closely contested. As happens, St. Louis County is often one of the last ones to come in, so Grant Hauschild was the 34th member of that majority, but I think without any of these wins, they obviously would not have gotten there. Senate maps, again, looks very similar to the House maps, to the governor's map. Again, you can see without Paul Marquardt or Ken Egan on the ballot up in the Moorhead area, that changes pretty dramatically. You see some changes in southeast Minnesota as well. Again, by precinct, again, this has been the trend. This is the trend. It continues to hold here for the last probably 3-4 cycles now. Metro maps again, same thing. It's kind of looks like the same splotch that the House had. The Senate, their Greater Minnesota number stayed essentially the same for the Democrats at 18%. This was a caucus that at one time, again back in 2006, 2010, before the 10 election, they had a significant amount of rural members from all across the state. I think the 2006 election, you could actually walk from Lake Superior to North Dakota and be in only a DFL Senate district. That is not the case anymore, for sure. And so there has been this just long time shift from what these historical norms had been. Again, very similar pattern in terms of vote totals. Blue in the Metro, red in Greater Minnesota in terms of the Senate. Senate leadership. So, the Senate DFL over the last several years has had a lot of turmoil when it comes to their leadership. In the last 2 years, they probably had 4 different leaders. Senator Bach, Senator Kent, Senator Lopez Franzen, and now Senator Carrie Diedzing from Minneapolis. So she is, I think, what I would say, one of the smartest people in the legislature. She is one of these people who reads everything, who notices when commas are out of place, and is very, very into the details of things, including tax policy, and is very, very strong supporter of local government aid. She, again, is somebody that I do think is of a profile that we can do business with. She is, like I said, very smart, very detail-oriented, but also fairly pragmatic. And I think that's why the Senate DFL chose her, because she does have that profile while still being from Minneapolis. There's just the alignment of the CGMC president and the Senate minority leader works really well because they are in each other's districts. Senator Mark Johnson from far northeast Minnesota. And so he again he's an attorney, smart guy. I think one of these folks that you would sort of call an up-and-comer within the Republican Party. Somebody that I just enjoy dealing with. He's a good guy, and I think we'll do okay there as well. We do know, at least in the Senate, who a couple of the important chairs are going to be. And so we have these comparison pictures from when they were first elected to now, and you can see there's maybe been some time passed since they first got into the legislature. So Ann Rest is going to be the tax chair. Interesting note, Ann Rest had originally served in the Minnesota House and was the House tax chair at one point. She is very knowledgeable, somewhat impatient. I don't know how many times we've gone and talked to her about this, that, or whatever, and you get about 10 minutes into it, and she kind of looks at you, she's like, well, I know that already. And then you just kind of move along. But she is a very good legislator, again, very detail-oriented. She is a TIF expert. It's really actually remarkable to watch, no matter who is in charge of the Senate, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, if there is a TIF bill or a TIF issue, basically they just all look at Senator Rest, and whatever she says goes. She has that level of respect in terms of that particular issue area. The finance chair, which is sort of the equivalent in the Senate to the House Ways and Means, it's kind of the funnel which every budget bill goes up to, is going to be Senator John Marty. Senator Marty's been in the legislature since the early 90s. Definitely has a different look to him. I think the bow tie is an improvement. And so, he has done a lot of work historically around health and human services, which of course is a big part of the state budget, and energy issues, environment issues. He's been on the tax committee, a very, very smart guy, pretty reasonable, somebody again that I think we can deal with. So we know at least those two chairs. We will find out hopefully beginning middle of December, both for the House and the Senate, who's going to fill out the rest of these chairmanships and how they will be aligned. And who ends up in those seats ends up being very critical for our work. Is it going to be somebody who is reasonable, who is open to new ideas, who is thoughtful, or is it not going to be? And the odds on any given committee chair for either are just about even. You know, it's kind of a crapshoot. So we will see. We'll talk about it at the Legislative Action Day when you all come back to St. Paul and we do some lobbying. We'll go through who some of these new personalities are, filling out some of these other positions, and give the lowdown on what we think of them. So